Welcome to Unveiled Confessions, where the most raw and shocking confessions are revealed. I'm pushing for 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
I met him on a Thursday night when I was bored out of my mind and swiping just to pass time. His profile wasn't anything special, just pictures of him in hoodies, a few gym selfies, and one with a random duck, which I thought was some kind of joke. He looked normal enough. Funny messages, decent grammar, not overly flirty. We texted for a few days and he suggested grabbing food somewhere local. I agreed mostly because he seemed harmless and I needed something to do that weekend. When I got there, he was already waiting outside, hands shoved into his jacket pockets like he'd been standing there for a while. In person, he looked quieter, kind of awkward, like the type who laughs before finishing his own jokes. The date wasn't bad at first. He talked a lot about random stuff like urban exploring and rescuing birds. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's got some weird hobby, right? But the way he said rescuing felt off. Like he wasn't joking. Dinner was fine. The food was mid, the conversation was okay, and I was already half ready to go home when he asked if I wanted to come over and see his setup. He said it so casually that I thought maybe he meant a gaming setup or something. I hesitated, but then he told me he lived nearby. I figured, fine, I'll stay for a bit, see what he's talking about, then leave. It was still early anyway. His place was tucked behind a row of old terraced houses with tiny gardens full of overgrown weeds. The second I stepped out of the car, I noticed this weird smell. Not strong at first, just a faint damp scent like wet towels left in a corner too long. He brushed it off, saying he'd been cleaning out the backyard earlier. Inside, the smell hit me harder. It wasn't just damp. It was this sour, earthy, animal kind of smell. The walls were yellowish, not from paint but from years of grime. His hallway light flickered like it was on its last legs, and the floorboards creaked under every step. He kicked off his shoes and told me to do the same, which made me instantly regret wearing socks with a hole near the toe. We walked into the living room and that's when I noticed the cages. There were a few near the windows, metal ones stacked on top of each other. Inside them were pigeons. Real ones. Dozens. Some missing feathers, some flapping wildly when I walked too close. Feathers and bits of food were scattered on the carpet. He acted like it was completely normal, saying something about them being rescued from the streets. I laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe this was just temporary, like he was keeping them there until he found a shelter. But he didn't look like he planned to give them away. The smell got worse the further I went in. He had newspapers laid out on the floor, covered in droppings, seed husks, and small bits of feathers that stuck to my shoes when I moved. The TV was on some random animal documentary, muted, flickering blue light across the room. He told me he also had ducks in the back garden. I thought he was joking until I heard quacking. He led me through the kitchen and that's where it got weird. The sink was full of what looked like bird food mixed with water, and there were trays of lettuce, corn, and breadcrumbs scattered everywhere. I kept thinking he was maybe a breeder or something, but the look in his eyes when he talked about them, like he was proud of it all, was off. He opened the back door and the smell that came out almost made me gag. The backyard looked like a small swamp. Mud everywhere, broken buckets filled with greenish water, and 3 ducks waddling around in it like they owned the place. The fence was half broken and there were wooden crates stacked in a corner, probably more cages. He stood there smiling like he was showing off a collection. I could hear the pigeons cooing from inside, the ducks splashing around outside, and a faint buzzing sound from somewhere deeper in the yard. That's when I noticed another cage near the shed. Something was moving in there. I asked him what it was and he said it was a special one. He walked over and opened the latch halfway, but before I could see, something hissed and flapped against the wire. It looked like a mix between a pigeon and a crow with one eye missing. He closed it quickly and said it wasn't ready to come out yet. My stomach dropped. I wanted to leave, but he was standing right in front of the door, talking about how he'd been doing this for years, how he took care of injured ones no one else wanted. I kept nodding, pretending to listen, scanning for my shoes. Every part of me was screaming to get out, but I didn't want to make it obvious. I told him I should probably go soon because it was getting late. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stared like he was thinking about something. Then he smiled and said he'd walk me out. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed a half-closed door near the stairs. Inside there were more cages stacked high. The sound of flapping, scratching, and faint cooing filled the room. I glanced inside for a second and saw at least 10 more birds in there, along with a few dead ones on the floor. He noticed me looking and quickly closed the door, saying something about quarantine space. My heart was racing. When I finally slipped my shoes on, he was standing too close, almost blocking the front door. His clothes smelled like the room, like dirt and feathers and something rotten. I muttered something about having to wake up early and reached for the handle. He hesitated again, staring for a moment before unlocking it slowly. I stepped outside and took a deep breath of fresh air that almost made me dizzy. He followed me to my car and waved as I got in. The ducks were still making noise behind the house, and the pigeons fluttered against the windows as I started the engine. I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. I didn't even look back when I pulled away. When I got home, I couldn't stop smelling that place. Even after showering twice, I swear I could still smell it on my skin. My hair, my clothes, everything reeked of that mix of rot and feathers. I ended up throwing away the socks I wore. The next morning, I woke up to a message from him saying he had fun and wanted to show me the new hatchlings next time. I blocked him immediately. A few hours later, I went on the app to check his profile again, and it was gone, like he'd deleted it completely. A week later, I passed by his area on the way to a friend's place. Curiosity made me slow down near his street. The smell hit before I even saw the house. The windows were wide open, pigeons flying in and out freely. No sign of him. Just that same flickering hallway light still on in the middle of the day. I didn't stick around to find out why. I knew something was weird the moment she walked into the cafe. Not because she looked off or anything, she actually looked great, but because she looked too comfortable. Like she'd done this before. Not with me but with someone else. There was this confidence in the way she scanned the room, smiled at the waitress, and pulled out her chair before I even stood up to help. I brushed it off though. I'd been waiting 2 weeks to meet her, and I wasn't about to ruin it by overthinking everything. We met on an app. She had this small dog in almost every photo, and her captions were funny in a dry way that I liked. We texted every night for days, and I was actually kind of excited. I hadn't been on a date in a while, and something about her made it feel easy. Her name was Jade, and she lived a couple towns over. She sat down across from me, pulled her hair behind her ear, and smiled like she'd just gotten away with something. That should have been my first clue. The date started normal. Coffee, small talk, random stories about work and weird customers. She laughed at all my jokes, asked me personal questions, touched her hair a lot. It all felt right. Too right, maybe. I noticed she kept checking her phone under the table though. Every time it buzzed, she'd glance down and lock it again fast. Her smile would tighten for a second, and then she'd force it back. I thought maybe she just didn't want to seem rude, so I didn't say anything. Halfway through, I went to the counter to grab more drinks. That's when her phone buzzed again, but louder this time, and she didn't notice because she was scrolling on her other hand. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the name on her lock screen caught my eye, Eli. My stomach dropped. Eli wasn't just some random name. Eli was my friend. Not my best friend, but someone I'd hung out with multiple times. We worked together last year, grabbed drinks a few times, played football on weekends. We still talk sometimes. I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it wasn't the same Eli. Maybe it was her brother or something. But then I remembered something. Just 2 weeks ago, Eli had mentioned his girlfriend in a group chat. Said she had brown hair, green eyes, and worked at a salon. The same as Jade. When I sat back down, I couldn't look at her the same. I kept staring at her face, her hands, the way she smiled at me. Everything felt fake now. She was talking about some trip she took to Italy, but my head was spinning. I asked her where she was from, just to double check, and when she said the exact same town Eli lived in, my heart started pounding. It didn't make sense. Why would she match with me if she was already dating him? Why would she go through with meeting me? I started wondering if she even knew I knew him. Maybe she didn't recognize the connection. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. My hands were shaking when I texted Eli. I kept it casual, just asked how things were with his girlfriend. He replied instantly, said they were great, and even sent a photo of them from the night before. My chest felt tight. Same hair, same face, same smile. Jade. I just stood there for a minute staring at my phone, feeling like an idiot. I didn't know if I should confront her or just leave. But part of me wanted to see how far she'd go. When I came back to the table, she was still scrolling on her phone, smiling at something. Probably him. I sat down and decided to act normal. I nodded along to whatever she was saying, trying to play it cool while my head was burning. She didn't seem to notice anything was off. Then her phone buzzed again, and I saw Eli's name pop up right on her screen this time. My stomach twisted. She turned the phone face down like nothing happened. After another 10 minutes, she suggested going somewhere else. Said her place was nearby and we could hang out there, maybe watch a movie. I said sure, just to see where this was going. Her flat was small, tidy, and smelled like some expensive candle. There were photos on the wall of her and the same dog from her profile, but one of them had Eli in it. His face was half cut off in the frame, but I knew it was him. Same haircut, same stupid chain he always wore. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I didn't say a word. She went into the kitchen to grab drinks, and I walked over to the picture like I was just looking around. My hands were sweating. That was him, no doubt. My brain started spinning, trying to figure out how to play it. I could call him right then and tell him everything, but something made me freeze. I didn't know who to be mad at, him or her. She came back with 2 cans and sat on the couch next to me, acting like nothing was wrong. I could feel my pulse in my neck. Every word out of her mouth sounded fake now, like she was performing. I wanted to ask her straight up, but I couldn't. Not yet. When she went to the bathroom, I picked up her phone. I didn't even have to unlock it. Notifications filled the screen. Messages from Eli, stuff about missing her, about meeting up later, about not saying anything yet. My stomach dropped all over again. Not saying anything yet. About what? About me? I put the phone down exactly where it was and just sat there, waiting. When she came back, I acted normal, said I had to leave soon. She didn't even ask why. Just smiled and said it was fine. As soon as I got outside, I texted Eli. I sent him a photo of the 2 of us that I'd secretly taken earlier in the cafe. His reply took a while. When it came through, it wasn't angry. It just said, I know. That was the part that really messed with me. He knew. He knew she was out with me and he didn't care. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message for a while, then blocked them both. But later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About how calm he'd been. About how relaxed she'd acted the whole time. I started wondering if they'd planned it. If this was some kind of twisted game between them. A few days later, one of my friends mentioned that Eli had quit his job and moved out of his flat. No one knew where he went. I checked her profile again, but she deleted it completely. Now sometimes, when I'm out and I see a girl with brown hair and that same kind of dog, my stomach drops for a second. I start thinking maybe it's her again, playing the same game with someone else. I don't even use dating apps anymore. Every time I think about matching with someone new, I remember that message, just 2 words, like it was all planned from the start. He knew. The night started off normal, at least that's what I thought. He picked me up right outside my building, leaning on this shiny black car that looked way too nice for someone who said he worked in delivery. I remember thinking it was kind of impressive, like he'd cleaned it just for me. The paint was spotless, and the inside smelled like one of those expensive air fresheners from petrol stations. Everything looked perfect. We'd been talking online for a couple weeks and he seemed funny, easy to talk to, a bit cocky but in a harmless way. He messaged me nonstop, always asking when we'd finally hang out, and I gave in. He said he'd pick me up and we'd go for a drive before getting food somewhere chill. I didn't think anything of it. The first few minutes were fine. He played some music, old R&B stuff, and we joked around. He drove kind of fast, but I figured he just liked showing off. Every time I looked over, he had this smirk on his face, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear stick. I remember thinking he looked way too confident for someone who was barely 22. About 15 minutes into the drive, we stopped at some lights, and I noticed how the car didn't sound right. Like the engine was grinding or something. It wasn't loud, but it felt off. He noticed me looking and just said the car had issues. That made sense, I guess. Not everyone can afford something fancy, and maybe it was just old. We got on the motorway and I started to relax. The windows were down, the air felt good, and the city lights were fading behind us. But then, out of nowhere, this car started following close behind. I didn't notice at first until the blue lights flashed. At first, I thought it was random. Maybe they just wanted to pass. But then the sirens came on, and the car behind us started flashing those headlights. I felt my stomach drop. He didn't pull over right away. He kept driving for another few seconds, muttering something under his breath, then finally swerved onto the side of the road. The police car pulled up behind us, lights bouncing off the mirrors, and everything got tense. I could hear my heart beating and my hands went cold. I kept thinking maybe he was speeding or something small. But he looked scared. Not nervous, scared. He told me to just stay calm and that it was nothing major. The way he said it didn't sound convincing at all. 2 officers came up, one on his side, one on mine. The flashlight hit me right in the face and I had to squint. They asked for his license and registration and I could feel him stiffen up. He handed them something, but I noticed his hand was shaking. They walked back to the patrol car and for a few seconds, it was just quiet. The only sound was the engine idling and some static from his radio. I turned to him, waiting for him to say something, but he just gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept looking in the rearview mirror. Then I saw it. Sweat running down his temple. His jaw twitching. His leg bouncing nonstop. He wasn't just nervous, he was panicking. The officers came back and everything happened fast after that. One of them asked him to step out. He tried to laugh it off but eventually opened the door. They started talking quietly and I couldn't hear what was being said. One officer walked around to the back of the car and the other leaned in through my side asking me questions. How I knew him, where we were going, if it was my car. I told them no, obviously it wasn't mine. Then I heard one of them say something into his radio. The other officer's tone changed. He told me to stay in the vehicle and not move. My chest started tightening. I turned around to see what was happening, and I saw the other officer grabbing my date's arm. That's when it hit me, something was seriously wrong. They started questioning him harder, voices raised, hands moving. He kept denying whatever they were saying, but I could see it in his face. He knew he was caught. The officer near the back of the car opened the boot and started checking inside. Then he yelled something to his partner, and the next thing I knew, one of them reached for his cuffs. And that's when he ran. He shoved one of them hard, almost knocking him over, and bolted across the road. Cars were swerving, honking, lights flashing everywhere. The officers shouted and chased after him, one of them yelling into his radio. I just sat there, frozen, watching the whole thing like it wasn't real. People were slowing down to see what was happening. I could hear shouting in the distance, the sound of shoes hitting the pavement, someone yelling, "Stop!" over and over. I remember gripping the seatbelt so tight my knuckles went white. I didn't know what to do, if I should get out or just stay put. Another police car pulled up a few minutes later, and one of the officers came back to the car. He asked if I was okay, but my brain was too scrambled to answer properly. I kept asking what was going on, and he said the vehicle was reported stolen earlier that evening. The owner had already called it in. The guy I was with had taken it from a car park, apparently left running while someone went inside a shop. Everything made sense suddenly, the way he hesitated before starting the car, the smell of the air freshener masking something, the nervous look when the sirens came on. I'd been sitting in a stolen car the entire time, just clueless. They asked me to get out so they could check my ID and make sure I wasn't involved. Standing there on the side of the motorway, wind whipping my hair and police lights flashing around me, I felt like I'd walked into someone else's nightmare. People were driving past, slowing down to stare. My date was somewhere out there in the dark, running from the police, and I was just standing by the stolen car like an idiot. After what felt like forever, one of the officers said they'd caught him a few streets down. He tried to jump over a fence and fell straight into someone's garden. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They told me I could go once they got my statement. I didn't even have a ride home anymore. They gave me a lift back, which was the most awkward drive of my life. Sitting in the back of a police car, explaining how I met a guy on an app who turned out to be driving a stolen vehicle wasn't exactly something I ever thought I'd be doing. When I finally got back, I just stood outside my building for a while, staring at nothing. He messaged me later that night from some random number. I didn't even open it. Just deleted it and turned off my phone. Every time I hear a siren now, I get that same tight feeling in my chest like I'm back on that motorway again, lights flashing, engine humming, realizing too late that the guy next to me wasn't who I thought he was. I should have known something was off the second she said she didn't like phone calls or video chats. She always had an excuse. Bad lighting, cracked camera, feeling bare-faced. I didn't think much of it though because she sounded young. Her texts were casual, funny, even a little flirty in a clumsy way. She said her name was Lila, 26, blonde, lived alone, worked in fashion or something like that. The pictures she sent were perfect, too perfect honestly. Blonde hair, green eyes, those filters that made the skin glow. I guess I just wanted to believe it. We talked for 2 weeks straight. Every day. Morning texts, late night chats. She'd send photos of coffee, her outfits of the day, and random mirror pics that looked straight out of Pinterest. When she suggested meeting in person, I didn't hesitate. I was just happy she actually wanted to meet. She picked a fancy restaurant downtown. The kind with velvet seats and a piano in the corner. I thought that was a bit much for a first date, but she said she wanted somewhere quiet. So there I was on a Friday night, wearing my best shirt, sitting at a table for two near the back. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her to text that she'd arrived. She was late, which didn't surprise me. Every girl I'd ever met off an app was late. About 20 minutes in, the waiter came over asking if I wanted to order a drink. I said I'd wait a bit longer. Then I noticed someone walking toward me from the entrance. Not her. Not even close. This woman had to be at least 60. Short gray hair, lipstick smudged a little outside the lines, heavy perfume that hit me before she even sat down. She was wearing a red dress with sequins, the kind you'd see at a ballroom, not a first date. I remember just staring, waiting for her to walk past me. But she didn't. She stopped right in front of my table. When she smiled, I felt my stomach twist. Her teeth were slightly yellowed, and her lipstick had bled into the corners of her mouth. She said my name, calm and sure, like she'd practiced it. I froze. It took a second for my brain to catch up. I asked who she was, and she said she was Lila. I thought it was a joke at first. Like maybe she was someone's aunt filling in or trying to prank me. But she just sat down, crossed her legs, and started talking like nothing was wrong. She said the photos were her niece, that she used them because men never respond to older women. She said she'd been looking for someone who understood maturity, and that I seemed like the type who could handle it. I just sat there, speechless, watching her pick up the menu with shaky ring-covered hands. My face felt hot. Everyone around us probably thought she was my grandmother. I tried to stand up and say I had to go, but she reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her hand was ice cold. She told me she wasn't there to waste my time, that she was serious about wanting someone in her life. Then she said something that made my whole body tense. She said she wanted to take care of me. I thought she was joking, but her expression didn't change. She started talking about how lonely she was, how she had money, how she wanted someone young to keep her company, and that I'd benefit from it. The way she said it made my skin crawl. I pulled my wrist away and told her I had to leave. She didn't even look mad. Just smiled like she'd expected that reaction. She said she could make it worth my while. Said she'd already set something aside for me if I gave her a chance. At that point, I just needed to get out of there. I stood up, muttered something about needing air, and walked straight toward the door. I could feel her eyes on me the entire way. Outside, I started walking fast, trying to figure out how to delete every trace of her from my phone. I was halfway down the street when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate ones. When I turned around, she was there, standing at the end of the block, holding her little red purse, staring dead at me. I walked faster, trying not to look back, but I could hear her shoes tapping the pavement. Every time I turned a corner, I'd catch her reflection in a window or see her shadow under a streetlight. She wasn't close enough to grab me, but she wasn't far either. I ducked into a side street and waited behind a parked car, my heart pounding. After a few seconds, I saw her shuffle past the corner, still looking around. That was when I noticed something weird. She was holding her phone up, recording. I could see the red light flashing. I waited until she disappeared, then bolted to my car. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock it. When I finally got inside, I locked the doors and just sat there for a minute, breathing hard. As soon as I got home, I blocked her on everything. App numbers, socials, gone. But I couldn't stop thinking about her face, that weird confident smile like she'd done this before. 2 nights later, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject just said dinner. The message was short. It said, "You didn't have to run. I'm still offering." Attached was a photo. It was me at the restaurant, sitting alone, looking at my phone. I deleted it instantly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still watching. I checked my socials, my tagged photos, even my car mirrors every time I parked somewhere. I didn't tell anyone because it sounded too insane. Who would even believe me? About a week after that, I saw her again. Not in person, but online. A new profile popped up on the same dating app, and I recognized the photos immediately, the same blonde girl she'd used before. Different name this time. Different bio. Same pictures. I reported it, but I don't know if it did anything. Sometimes I still get random follow requests from empty accounts, all with similar names, variations of Lila, different numbers after. I ignore them, but it's messed with my head. Every time someone asks to meet up now, I make them video call first. I don't care how awkward it feels. I can't go through that again. The image of that old woman in the red dress, her perfume filling the air, that calm voice calling me by name, it's burned into my memory. The last time I checked that old restaurant's website, there was a review posted a few weeks later. It just said, "Wonderful evening with a handsome young man. I hope he's doing well." No name. But I didn't need one. I already knew who it was. I don't even know why I agreed to go. She seemed normal online, funny, confident, a little over the top sometimes, but still cool. Her name was Layla. We met on this dating app where every conversation somehow turned into a debate about food. We joked around about our favorite restaurants, and she told me she loved big groups and good vibes. I didn't think much of it. I figured she just liked being social. She suggested we go out to this new Korean barbecue spot that had just opened downtown. The place had been all over TikTok and I thought it'd be perfect. Casual enough for a first date, not too fancy. She said she'd handle the reservation, which already felt like a good sign. Most people don't bother doing that. When the night came, I got there a bit early. The restaurant was packed, all sizzling grills and people laughing too loud. I texted her saying I'd grabbed a table for two near the back. She replied saying she was bringing a few friends, but they wouldn't be staying long. I figured maybe one or two. Maybe someone dropping by. 10 minutes later, I saw her walk in, and behind her was a whole crowd. Not two. Not five. 17 people. I counted. She looked excited, waving like it was totally normal, walking in like she owned the place. My jaw nearly dropped. They all followed her, chatting, laughing, carrying bags and phones and drinks. It looked like a birthday dinner, not a first date. I just sat there frozen as she hugged me and introduced everyone one by one. Her cousins, her besties, even a coworker who didn't look like they wanted to be there. I couldn't even remember half their names. Before I could even process what was happening, they started pulling chairs over, squeezing around the table. The waiter had to rearrange everything to fit them. I tried to make a joke about it, but nobody really heard me over the noise. The grills were already heating up and people were ordering like they'd been starving for days. Layla acted completely normal. She leaned back in her seat, scrolling on her phone, laughing every now and then. Meanwhile, her friends were shouting over each other, asking for drinks, side dishes, extra meat, noodles, desserts, everything. The table looked like a buffet in minutes. I sat there trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank. But she kept saying how sweet it was that I'd picked such a good spot. I didn't even pick it. She did. As the food kept coming, I felt more and more out of place. The conversation didn't even include me. They talked about mutual friends, drama, work, whatever. Every now and then she'd glance at me and smile like this was all totally fine. I kept waiting for her to say something like, "Don't worry, everyone's paying for themselves." But that sentence never came. When the waiter dropped the bill folder on the table, everyone went quiet for a second. Then Layla looked straight at me. That's when it hit me. She expected me to pay. For everyone. I laughed a little because I thought it had to be a joke. There was no way she was serious. But then one of her friends thanked me for inviting them out. I almost choked. The waiter came back and stood there waiting. Layla nudged the folder closer to me like it was some kind of test. I opened it and my chest tightened. The total was just over 900 pounds. My brain went blank. I looked around the table and everyone was just chatting again like it was no big deal. Someone even ordered another round of drinks after the bill was sitting right in front of me. I tried saying something, but the music was too loud and no one was listening. Layla leaned closer and told me that a real gentleman wouldn't make a fuss. That's when I realized she wasn't joking. She actually thought I was going to pay for all 18 of them. I told her I didn't have that kind of money on me, and she rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. Then she turned to her friends and started whispering. They all gave me looks, like I'd ruined their night. One of them even said something under her breath about cheap men. My hands were sweating. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even eat that much. Maybe 2 pieces of meat and a soda. I kept thinking about how insane this was. Who even does that? The waiter came back again, clearly uncomfortable. I told him I'd pay for my portion and that was it. Layla stood up, slammed her napkin down and started arguing. She said I led her on, that I'd promised her a nice night. Everyone at the table was staring now. Other customers were staring too. I could feel my face burning. The waiter tried to calm things down, but she kept going. She said she'd post about it online, that I embarrassed her. I didn't even wait for her to finish. I pulled out enough cash to cover my part and walked out. I could still hear her yelling behind me as I left. I didn't even look back. When I got outside, the cold air hit me and I just stood there for a second trying to process what just happened. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Texts from her calling me rude, selfish, cheap, every insult she could think of. Then she sent a photo of the bill with some long message about how a real man would have stepped up. I blocked her. The next day, my friend sent me a screenshot from Twitter. She'd posted about me. Said I'd abandoned her and her friends with the bill. The post had hundreds of likes, and people were commenting without even knowing the full story. I tried to ignore it, but it kept spreading. By the end of the day, I got a message from one of her friends saying the restaurant had called the police because they all left without paying. She asked if I could help out, since my name was on the reservation. I didn't even reply. Later that week, I passed by that same restaurant with some coworkers. The waiter from that night recognized me. He just shook his head and said she'd been there again, with another guy. Same thing. Big group, big bill. He said that time the guy actually paid. I don't even know what to call that. Catfishing, but worse. like a scam hidden under fake eyelashes and lip gloss. Now every time someone says, "Let's grab dinner," I double-check how many people they mean. It's been months, but I still remember that table, crowded, loud, full of strangers eating like it was their birthday while I sat there quietly, realizing I'd been set up from the moment I agreed to meet her. I honestly thought it was nerves at first. You know that weird feeling you get before meeting someone new? The tight stomach, the dry mouth, the constant urge to check your reflection? That's what I thought it was. But looking back, I should have known something was wrong before I even left the house. Her name was Ava. We met online, talked for a couple of weeks, and decided to meet up for dinner. She picked this small Italian place near the river. I'd been looking forward to it all week. Everything about her seemed easy, her texts, her humor, even her voice notes. I wanted it to go right. The day of the date, I woke up feeling off. My stomach felt heavy like I'd swallowed something bad. But I brushed it off, thinking it was just hunger or anxiety. I barely ate all day so I wouldn't look bloated, which probably made things worse. By the time I got to the restaurant, I could feel my body getting weird. My skin was clammy, my hands were cold, and I kept feeling like I needed to sit down. I got there before her, ordered water, and told myself to get it together. When she walked in, she looked even better in person. I tried to act normal, smiling and joking like I wasn't about to pass out. We ordered pasta and some wine, and for the first 10 minutes everything felt fine. Then the nausea hit. Out of nowhere. I tried to keep talking, but I could feel sweat running down my back. My stomach started twisting like someone was wringing it out. Every sound in the restaurant got louder, the clinking glasses, the laughter, the music. It all blended into this blur while I tried not to throw up on the table. She noticed, obviously. She asked if I was okay, and I just nodded, pretending to cough into my napkin. I barely touched my food. I remember staring at the plate of spaghetti like it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen. The smell of garlic made me gag. I excused myself to the bathroom, thinking maybe I just needed a minute. But as soon as I locked the stall door, I threw up so hard I thought I was going to pass out. It wasn't just food, it felt like my whole body was rejecting itself. When I came back out, I could barely stand. My hands were shaking, my vision was blurry, and my legs felt like they weren't mine. She stood up right away looking scared. I tried to say something, but I don't even remember what came out. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor. I woke up in a hospital bed hours later. The lights were too bright and there was an IV in my arm. My mouth was dry, my throat burned, and everything smelled like disinfectant. A nurse came in and said I'd been brought in by an ambulance. Apparently, Ava had called for help after I fainted. They said I had some kind of severe stomach infection. Probably viral. The doctor mentioned food poisoning at first, but when the test came back, it turned out to be a stomach bug that was going around. My temperature had shot up to nearly 40 degrees Celsius, and my blood pressure had dropped. No wonder I felt like death. Ava showed up at the hospital the next morning. She looked exhausted, probably from the whole ordeal. She brought some stuff, water, snacks, her phone charger, like she didn't plan to leave right away. I was embarrassed more than anything. Who collapses on a first date? She stayed for a few hours, sitting next to the bed while I tried to drink water without feeling like I'd puke again. Every now and then she'd laugh it off, saying it'd be a funny story someday. But I could tell she was a bit freaked out. I don't blame her. I was kept for 2 nights. The second night, I started to feel human again. My stomach still hurt, but I wasn't dizzy anymore. When I finally got discharged, she offered to give me a ride home. It was quiet in the car. She said she'd check up on me in a few days, but I didn't expect to actually hear from her again. 3 days later, she texted me saying she'd been throwing up since the morning. I felt terrible. I told her to go to the doctor, but she said she thought it was just something she ate. Then she said she couldn't stop sweating and her stomach felt like it was tearing itself apart. I didn't want to say it, but I knew exactly what it was. She'd caught it from me. Later that night, she messaged again saying she was in A&E, dehydrated, weak, the same symptoms I'd had. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know you could pass something like that through casual contact, but I guess when you're sharing drinks and sitting close, it's possible. The weird part was how bad hers got. She texted me from the hospital saying the doctors were confused because her blood pressure was dropping fast, and her fever wouldn't go down. She stayed overnight too. For someone who was perfectly fine a few days earlier, it felt unreal how quickly everything fell apart. For the next week, we kept messaging each other from our separate beds, joking about how cursed the date was. But underneath the jokes, it was kind of unsettling. We both got so sick so suddenly. When she finally got discharged, she called me. Her voice sounded weaker, slower. She said her body felt heavy, like she hadn't fully recovered. I knew exactly what she meant because I still didn't feel right either. My stomach would twist randomly even when I hadn't eaten. We never met up again after that. I think both of us just associated each other with that night. It wasn't even awkward, just cursed. Like some weird reminder that one dinner can completely ruin your body. A few weeks later, I passed by that same restaurant on my way to work. The lights were off. A sign on the door said they were closed for deep cleaning. I didn't think much of it until I saw a local news post later that week saying several people had been hospitalized after eating there. Something about cross-contamination or a viral spread. I wanted to message her and tell her I'd seen it, but she never replied to my last text. Her profile on the app disappeared too. Maybe she deleted it, maybe she didn't want anything to do with that night ever again. Now, every time I feel the slightest stomach pain, I get paranoid. It's like my body still remembers lying on that cold restaurant floor, sweating and gasping while strangers stared. That date didn't just go wrong, it wrecked both of us. The last thing she ever sent me was a photo of a hospital wristband with the words, "Never again" written in the caption. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. It started off normal. I got there early, sat by the window, and tried to calm my nerves. It was my first proper date in months, and I wanted it to go right. His name was Ryan. He'd been super sweet over text, kind of awkward but funny in a way that felt genuine. He picked a small diner that wasn't too loud, and I thought that was actually kind of nice. Chill and simple. When he texted that he'd arrived, I looked toward the door expecting to see just him. But when the door opened, he walked in, with someone else right beside him. An older woman. Dressed in a floral blouse and holding a purse that looked older than both of us. At first, I thought maybe it was just a random person walking in behind him. But then she waved at me. He walked over, smiling like nothing was weird, and said something I didn't even process at first because I was too busy trying to figure out who she was. Then she sat down, right next to him, and started adjusting the napkin on the table like she'd done this 1,000 times before. That's when he said it. That she was his mom. I laughed a little, thinking it was a joke. But she didn't laugh. She smiled politely and said she was just tagging along. The way she said it sounded way too casual for what was actually happening. I just sat there, frozen, trying to decide if I should get up and leave right away or wait to see how bad it got. Spoiler, it got bad. The waitress came over to take our order, and his mom instantly took control. She ordered for both of them, specifying how she wanted things cooked, how the plates should be served, and even asked what oil they used in the fries. I ordered my food quietly while she gave me this sideways glance, like she was mentally scoring my menu choice. While we waited for the food, she started asking me questions, except they weren't really questions. They were tests. She asked where I worked, what my family did, if I cooked, if I planned to settle down soon. Every answer I gave seemed to disappoint her in some way. When I said I worked full-time, she said something about young people being too focused on careers. When I mentioned living on my own, she frowned and said it was lonely. When I said I didn't like cooking much, she let out this quiet little sigh like I'd failed some unspoken exam. Ryan didn't say much the whole time. He just sat there smiling, nodding, trying to act like this was all fine. Every now and then he'd glance at me with this helpless look, but he never stepped in. He just let her keep talking. At one point she reached across the table and started straightening his collar, like we were in some weird family dinner instead of a first date. Then she looked right at me and said she'd always taken care of her boy, as if that was supposed to impress me. The food came and I couldn't even enjoy it. She picked apart every single thing I did. The way I held my fork. The way I tucked my hair behind my ear. Even the way I sat. She told me I slouched too much. She said my posture gave off low confidence energy. I almost laughed because it was so ridiculous, but she was dead serious. Ryan still didn't say anything. He just smiled nervously and told her to relax, but she completely ignored him. When the waitress came back to check on us, his mom told her the fries were too salty and sent them back, without even asking Ryan if he was fine with them. Then she looked at me and said, "A good woman never settles for less." I nearly choked on my drink. At that point, I knew I was done. I checked my phone and pretended I had a message. She noticed immediately and asked if I was one of those girls who can't go an hour without checking her phone. I told her I was waiting for a message from work. She just raised her eyebrows like she didn't believe me. Ryan tried to lighten the mood by telling a story from his job, but she interrupted halfway through to correct him on some detail. She literally fact-checked her own son. The whole atmosphere was awkward to the point of physical pain. People at nearby tables were glancing over, probably trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank. When the waitress brought the check, I reached for my purse, but his mom said she'd already covered it. Then she turned to me and said, Next time maybe you can treat. If there's a next time. The way she said it was sharp, like she already knew there wouldn't be. That was it for me. I smiled, thanked them both, and stood up. Ryan looked confused, maybe even a little embarrassed, but he didn't stop me. His mom gave me this polite fake smile like she was glad I was leaving. I walked out before either of them could say another word. The second I got outside, I just started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe that actually happened. I sat in my car for a few minutes, replaying the whole thing in my head. Every little moment. The way she analyzed me like a science project. The way he just sat there and let her. He texted me later that night saying his mom really liked me. I didn't even respond. I just deleted his number. 2 days later, I got a message from him again, longer this time. He said his mom thought I was sweet but not serious material. I laughed out loud reading it. I guess she'd already written her review. He tried to say he wanted to meet up again, just us this time, but I never replied. I couldn't. Every time I imagined his face, I pictured her sitting right next to him, critiquing everything I said. It wasn't even anger I felt, just this weird mix of disgust and pity. The craziest part? A few months later, I was scrolling through social media, and his profile popped up in my suggested list. I clicked out of curiosity, and there it was, a new post. A selfie of him and his mom at what looked like the same diner. The caption said, "Dinner with my favorite lady." I closed the app immediately. Now, whenever someone asks what my worst date was, I always say, the one where I met his mom. But I never tell them just how bad it actually was. Because honestly, it sounds made up. Like one of those viral stories you read online. But it wasn't. It was real. And every time I pass that diner now, I picture her still sitting there, napkin folded neatly in her lap, waiting to judge whoever he brings next. I knew something was off the second I walked into her house. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a weird smell I couldn't place. Not bad exactly, but strange. Like a mix of raw meat and cleaning chemicals. I tried to tell myself it was just from cooking. I mean, she'd been texting me all week about how she wanted to cook something special for our first date. I thought it was sweet. A little intense maybe, but sweet. Her name was Mia. We'd been talking online for a couple of weeks, and she was the one who suggested doing dinner at her place instead of going out. I thought it was a bit fast, but she sounded so excited that I just went along with it. She said she loved cooking and that I was in for a surprise. I figured that meant lasagna or something normal. Not whatever that night turned into. Her house was tiny but spotless. Every surface looked like it had been wiped down 5 minutes before I arrived. The air smelled heavy, and the curtains were half closed even though it was still bright outside. She greeted me with this big, too-wide smile and handed me a drink before I even took my shoes off. I asked what she was making, and she said it was her grandmother's recipe. When I tried to ask what kind of dish it was, she just winked and told me not to ruin the surprise. I remember laughing awkwardly because I didn't want to seem rude, but something about the way she said it made me feel weird. While she cooked, I sat on the couch trying to ignore how strange the smell was getting. It wasn't like normal food. It was heavier, almost metallic. I could hear her humming in the kitchen, some old tune I didn't recognize, and every now and then she'd call out something random about presentation and texture. I couldn't tell if she was talking to me or herself. When she finally came out, she was holding 2 plates with a grin that looked proud enough to burst. The food looked strange. It was a kind of stew, dark brown and oily, with pieces of meat that didn't look right. The smell hit me first, rich, sweet, and kind of sour at the same time. I tried to smile, but I could feel my stomach twisting already. She sat down across from me and just stared, waiting for me to take the first bite. I didn't want to be rude, so I picked up the spoon and scooped a bit. The meat was chewy, almost rubbery. It didn't taste like beef, not really like chicken either. Just wrong. The texture was off too, dense and stringy, like something that shouldn't be eaten. I tried to swallow it quickly, but the taste lingered. She looked thrilled, watching my reaction like she'd just passed a test. I said it was interesting, and she clapped her hands, saying she was glad I liked it. Then she insisted I eat more. I wanted to stop, but she wouldn't let me. Every time my spoon slowed down, she'd lean forward and say I had to finish it because it was good manners. She even pushed the bowl closer when I hesitated. Her tone wasn't angry, but there was something off about it, like she'd snap if I refused. So I kept eating, forcing down bite after bite while she talked about how she'd spent hours preparing it. My throat burned from the spice and I could feel sweat building up at the back of my neck. She didn't even eat that much herself, just picked at it slowly, eyes on me the whole time. Halfway through I felt sick. My stomach cramped and I could feel something heavy sitting inside me like a rock. I tried to excuse myself to the bathroom, but she said I should sit and let it settle. She smiled the whole time, but there was something cold behind her eyes. I told her I was fine, but she didn't stop watching until I'd cleaned the bowl completely. Afterward, she made tea and started talking about animals. At first, it was normal stuff, how she loved horses, how she used to ride when she was younger. Then she mentioned how she never wasted anything. I didn't really get what she meant until she started talking about her uncle, who apparently worked on a farm overseas. She said he sent her special cuts sometimes. I laughed, thinking she was joking. But she didn't laugh back. That's when my stomach dropped. I asked what kind of meat it was and she just smiled. She said, "It's not common here, but it's perfectly fine to eat in some countries." She didn't say the word, but I knew. The look in her eyes told me. I pushed my chair back, but my legs felt weak. She stood up too, tilting her head, like she was confused why I looked upset. I barely managed to say goodbye before getting out of there. The second I got outside, I threw up on the sidewalk. My throat burned and my stomach kept clenching like it was trying to push out what I'd eaten. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept telling myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she just said something weird. But the taste was still in my mouth and I knew it wasn't beef or pork or anything normal. It haunted me. The next day, I looked up her name on social media out of curiosity, and that's when I found her old posts. Photos of horses. Dozens of them. Her standing next to them, brushing their manes, feeding them. But the captions were strange. Things like, "Nothing goes to waste," and "honoring them in every form." The newest post was from just a week before our date. It said, "He was a good one. My heart is full." And below it, a picture of her freezer full of vacuum-sealed bags. I couldn't eat for 2 days after that. The thought of it made me sick all over again. She texted me later that week asking how I was feeling. I didn't reply. Then she sent another message saying she hoped I enjoyed something real for once. That was the last one I got before I blocked her. I still can't eat stew. The smell alone makes me gag. Sometimes I wake up thinking I can still taste that weird sweetness at the back of my throat. I told one friend about it and he said maybe she was lying, that people online say stuff like that for attention. I wanted to believe that, but deep down I know she wasn't lying. Her face when she watched me eat, it wasn't just pride. It was satisfaction. The worst part is that I don't even know what kind of meat it really was. I just know it wasn't supposed to be on a dinner plate.